Wednesday, May 19th, 2004, and this is the beginning of an interview with Mr. Kenneth Larry Lowenstein at the Atlanta History Center in Atlanta, Georgia. Mr. Lowenstein was born November 20th, 1919. My name is Lynn Lowence, and I'll be the interviewer. Mr. Lowenstein, could you state for the recording what war and branch of the service you served in?
Just to correct one of the bits of news, my birth date is November 26th.
Oh, thank
That's
you.
okay, not that, but you got to keep it fair. And I was in World War II during 1941 and 1945. I joined in my senior year at college before Pearl Harbor because I believed strongly in what our government was trying to achieve against the Nazis and Germany. I enlisted, but as an aviation cadet, which in those days were called flying cadets. It was a special group of cadets that were sent to special training in fact, I was sent to Oklahoma City in 1941. It was November, I believe in November 21st, 1941, to take my primary training at Oklahoma City at a base called Cimarron Field, which incidentally was owned by a famous pilot at that time, whose name now slips my mind. But he was part of the Post and Getty era of pilots. And from there, I unfortunately washed out as not being capable of handling the training as quickly as they wanted us to, and re-enlisted again out on the outside, because standing there were people from the Canadian Air Force, and they wanted to take all us washed out cadets who had good background in training and train them in their style up in Canada. Well, I accepted that assignment and was waiting to be sent to Montreal, and the date was November, actually it was November 10th that I was to report. Unfortunately, or fortunately, Pearl Harbor happened November the 7th, and all foreign enlistments to our boys were canceled. So therefore I had to start all over again, and I went back and took my tests and went back to be a bombardier navigator, trained to be a bombardier navigator. I was sent to school, and at a certain point in time they reported that they had enough bombardier trainers, and so we were sent over to enlisted personnel at the Kelly Field in San Antonio, Texas. Well, that was going along fine. I was working there on the base newspaper and taking my basic training and so forth, when a request came for aerial observers. That's the guys that flew those small airplanes and spotted for the armored forces. Well, I qualified for that, and I went to Fort Knox, Kentucky, to become an armored force officer. However, about a week later they had filled that school up, and we were returned to the Air Force to be sent overseas, since our original organizations had split up in various areas. So there I was, back as an enlisted man, being shipped overseas, and the first little assignment that I got was in England. And from England we were dispersed to Ireland, and I was sent to a base outside of a little place called Lough Neagh, which is known as the largest eel lake in the world. It was built by the Irish, and Captain Ellis, as I remember, was the name of the man that owned it. And we were on a little base there that trained B-24 pilots, and I was assigned as the PR and public relations man, and assigned to be a reporter for the Stars and Stripes as a correspondent.
Had you had any experience with public relations or writing?
Oh,
or?
yeah, in college I took journalism courses and so forth. And in fact, I wrote for the newspaper and the magazine in college, and I was experienced in that since I knew about writing and editing.
Where'd you go to college?
I went to New York University.
Okay.
In fact, when I came back to to wait for my reassignment, I worked for the New York Daily News in their promotion department, and worked for, at that time, someone I hadn't known, Ed Sullivan, and his,
Oh my God.
what was it, the dance contest that he put on all the time, and the boxing and so forth. So I got a taste of promotion, promoting situations in the newspaper field, which helped me a great deal to promote myself as a journalist for the Army. And since very few people were in that area, particularly in these small units, and I naturally got the assignments, which was great, because all I did was go around writing stories about my fellow soldiers, my fellow airmen, and sent it to their local newspapers. And I guess I wrote several hundred releases over the years. In fact, I was fortunate somehow, and I don't know how I did it. I got the flimsies. The flimsies is the second page of the releases that I sent to Stars and Stripes, and I kept the flimsies. And I still have every single flimsy that I wrote. And I got all those stories, and I got a couple of samples of where they appeared in the papers. And actually what it does is prove that I did write them, and that they were printed somewhere. But it was very exciting to do that, and I was very fancy. I wore a correspondent label on my shirt, and in order to impress people, I didn't wear any of my stripes. I was a staff sergeant and staff sergeant. But they thought I was a real correspondent, like Walter Cronkite or Ed Morrow or something like that. And I used to go around with all of the writers, the journalists that came over. For example, one time I was in Paris. I ran into a fellow named Doug Edwards, who later became very famous on CBS News, and he wanted to take me for a drink at the Scribe Hotel, which was in Paris and was the hangout for the journalists, the correspondents. I said, look, I'm not really one. He says, forget it. And he took his hat off, his officer's cap, put it on my head, put his arm around my shoulders, says, let's go have a drink. So that's how I got in there, and we had a jolly old time, as we say, and it was kind of fun. But I traveled with all my units into Germany. We were in several war zones. The unit that I was assigned to was kind of interesting. They put together a group of people who were experts in different phases, in armament and so forth, and trained us to go into Germany and to follow the 7th, I guess it was the third Army, which was Patton's Army. So as they picked up and found the airfields and the plants where they built all the stuff, we were supposed to take them over, wrap them up, package them, and send them back to the States at Wright Field, which was in Ohio, and was the source of experimentation from all the Air Force. In fact, we came across a number of the first issues of the not the motor, the other thing that you what we have now, the airplanes, and we sent all of that stuff back, and all in my notes, and I did stories on it. I've got all those stories, and I've got all the notes on that, and I can, it's too specific to go through it right now, but we got that and sent it all back to the States, and by that time we had started from Le Havre and went down Le Havre into Germany, through France into Germany, down to a little town called Mannheim, and we went through all of that, Oringen, Schweizingen, Nuremberg, Heidelberg, all into the area of the German territory where Hitler had his wren's nest and so forth. And we followed them all the way down, taking up this material, and we found some very interesting things. For example, we found lipstick factories where phonies, actually they were making cartridges. We found dummy airplanes that try to get our bombers to drop bombs on them, and but they never really got away with it. In fact, one interesting experience was that we captured, 4 of us were out in a Jeep looking for something, I can't remember what, and a German officer came up with a white flag and full dress uniform and surrendered the city, the little town, to us. and the senior officer in our Jeep was a captain, and he didn't know what to do. He says, come on, let's go in there, see what it's all about. Well, they surrendered about 200 people, and they surrendered their guns and their cameras and everything, and we took them over. And on the way back, we're driving back, we ran into an infantry outfit, and the colonel, my captain said to the colonel, there's a town there that we just captured, you want to take them? And he said, what are you guys in the Air Force doing in Germany, in this combat area? You're not supposed to be here. He says, well, this is where we were assigned. He says, well, if you ever come across a situation like this again, be sure to let us know, because that could make a lot of trouble if we are unaware of what's happening. But that was, so I captured a town. I felt like a hero. Didn't get a medal for it or anything like that, but at least nobody shot me, and that was kind of fun. Well, we went right through there to Paris, to London, and I spent some time in London. And in Paris, I was sent there, but the end of the war was over, and my colonel wanted us to get the pets. We had a lot of pets, and they wouldn't let us take them back to the States. So he assigned me to go to Paris to write a story for the Stars and Stripes about getting our officers, pets, and enlisted men, their dogs or parrots or whatever they had, back to the States. So I spent 3 or 4 days in Paris on my own with a very good friend, by the way, that was from Atlanta, Georgia. His name was Billy Landrum, and I've been looking for Billy Landrum, but I could never seem to find him. There are quite a few Billy Landrums in Atlanta, but I never really caught the right one. But I'm still looking for him and hope to see him if he's still alive before I go too. But
what did you find out that they were doing about the people's pets?
Well, we wrote a story about it, and it went into the newspaper, and it was approved. I mean, the general public or the Army approved sending pets back home. So we were allowed to do that. And the colonel was very happy because he had a very nice dog and he wanted to get it back. But as I remember, it was approved to do that, and a lot of guys brought their animals, pets, or whatever it is. No women, just pets, although you could say women were pets. And of course we had no fraternization rules at the time, but I can tell you now that nobody paid much attention to that, as others in the zone of Z of I, as we call the zone of the interior, can relate now that it's over, so to speak. But a lot of guys got married over there, and some didn't. But we finally got back to the States, and we were sent to our homes, and that's where I went. And I had already had a bride at home, and I went to find her. In fact, I was overseas for 2.5 years, and the problem was that when I saw my bride for the first time after coming back after 2.5 years, I didn't recognize her. I mean, 2.5 years we kind of grew up. She was, when we got married, she was 20, and I was 22. But we managed to live together and bring up two little girls for some 30 years. And unfortunately, she passed away, and a couple of years later, I remarried. But after we were brought up in New York State, and did everything up there in New York, and finally, when she passed on, and I remarried, my new bride said, let's get out of New York. It's a busy, busy place. We want to relax after your intent and being in the service. So we found Atlanta, and we moved down here. And now today we're married 31 years. So between the two marriages, I have like 63, 64 years of marriage to two persons, 2 different wives, 2 different agendas, and it worked out beautifully. I was very, very lucky on both sides.
What was your first wife's name?
My first wife's name was Muriel.
Okay.
Muriel, and my current wife's name is Joyce.
Okay.
And she takes good care of me. Us WW2 guys have a few little aches and pains, but she's been very strong and very helpful, and has taken care of me through all of these situations. In fact, without her, I wouldn't be able to exist.
How about your daughters' names?
We have 4 daughters between us.
Okay.
I had a Barbara and a Carol, and she had a Penny and a Patsy. and they're all but one is well, one's a single parent, and she has 2 children, Summer and Jesse, and my other daughter, Barbara, is a school teacher in Stamford, Connecticut, and they do not have children. They opted against having kids, but she's a school teacher, so there's a lot of kids. My wife's daughter, first daughter, is a not renowned jewelry designer and very well known in the business, Penny Prevel, and she has 2 boys, both just graduating from Wisconsin, University of Wisconsin, and she has another daughter, Patsy, who lives in Jerusalem, and has 4 children. 2 of them, one is married, one is getting married, and one has a child. So we're also great grandparents in this. And so she is going to Israel for the second daughter's married in June, and to get to see her great granddaughter for the first time, and see the other one that got married, who she didn't know the husband either. But it'll be a joyous occasion, and she's going to do it. And unfortunately, I'm not physically able to do the trip. Otherwise, I certainly would go with her. But to take care of me home, I got a babysitter, and to take good care of me.
How about sharing with us some of your stories that you remember that you wrote for Stars and Stripes?
Oh, yeah,
some of
well,
the situations.
Coming to think of it, I brought some. I think this is an armband. This is an armband that I took off one of the soldiers in the city we captured. But before that, we didn't have Camel's cigarettes or anything like that, but we had what we called, what is the name of it?
Zipper?
Oh, the zippers, yeah, zippers. This is I don't think you can smoke them, but this is one of the cigarettes that we bought in the PX. I think it was 10 cents. And this strange warped piece of metal. An interesting story to that is that I was visiting a buddy in one of the camps outside of London.
Do you remember his name?
Yeah, Kenny Snowden. Kenny has since passed. He was my best friend, actually. He was a wonderful guy from Albany, New York, and he got a Dear John letter while he was there, and some years later married one of the girls that was in his outfit in London. So it turned out right. They have a couple of kids, and I've lost track since he has passed on. But the Bushy Park was where we were, and he was assigned to the general's headquarters, General Eisenhower, and he worked for one of the generals there. But that piece of metal that I showed came from a V2 bomb. We got me a bed in one of the barracks. I went out that night for some drinking and eating and whatever else that goes along with that. And when I came back to the barracks, the door of the barrack was lying on my bed. In other words, if I had been asleep or lying on my bed, that door probably would have knocked me out and I wouldn't be here to talk to you. But that piece of metal, I went outside and I scrounged around, I found that piece of metal, which was, as I say, part of a V2 bomb, which is very interesting. We saw lots of, or heard lots of, in London and England and so forth, but after a while we paid no attention to them at all. But one of the things before going overseas, we, I don't know if you can see this, but this is a cut down bayonet. We all carried knives with us. Never had to use it, thank you. But we always carried little knives with us, as well as our guns. And I still have that, and so forth. Now, when I got out of the service, I got my medal. These are things that you wear on your uniform. They're small versions of the medals. I see one here is the ETO, European Theater, the pre-Pearl Harbor one, the Good Conduct Medal, naturally, the North American the Decoration Medal, the Germany Occupation Medal and ribbon. And so there's 6 of them here, and they look kind of cute, and I like to wear it on Soldiers' Day. So they say, "What's this for, Daddy? Oh, what did you do while you were in the Army?" So those are some of the things that I have, and I've given you some pictures which you may or may not want to put into into this interview, but that was all part of it.
How about specific stories? Any others that you wrote that come to mind that were really interesting to you?
Well, there was one story as I remember. I got them all, and I didn't bring all the stuff with me. But that the captured town was one of them.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing, we came across a piece of machinery that was in a tunnel. Must have been about a mile long, and I would say a mile high, and around where they built aircraft to keep it from being bombed out.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Where was that?
that was in Germany.
Okay.
And then we found wind tunnels and things of that nature that they tested. There was one camera they said that that it would shoot 1,000 to 1 million frames per second, and that story broke in. That was amazing. That they had the Germans were fantastic in their product that they got. Just that, thank goodness that their leader was not that fantastic, because otherwise we would be speaking German today. But we kept ahead of everything. We really didn't all know what we were doing. We just took orders and whatever it was, and some of us were more lucky than others. I remember getting to Belgium just after the Bulge, and thank goodness we were not in the Bulge, because first of all, it was a very cold weather during that time, and so we kind of missed that. But I remember buying some beautiful cookies and cakes in Luxembourg. There was a very fine. We were in Luxembourg, but we didn't do anything. We were going through. The main thing is coming down from Le Havre all the way down to Germany, through Germany, that we did things that were not necessarily, if I can use the word kosher, but we did it anyway. For example, when we came over a house, and when we came over these homes that were just evacuated, we would take, everybody would take what they wanted. Silverware, glassware, clothing, anything that they could box up and send home. And everybody did it. In fact, the matter is, and this is not an exaggeration as far as I'm concerned, I saw a lieutenant colonel in the Air Force box up a whole house, crate it, and send it to his hometown. I don't know who it was, where it went, or whatever, but I do remember having it being put on a truck and being shipped out. We're all the same. It just depends on what army you're in. So that was kind of interesting. We were very loyal to each other. We helped everybody out, and we did the best we could.
How many were in your unit?
About 2,500.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, it was a big unit.
And you all moved?
All moved together, yeah. I remember we stopped off at Mannheim, which is the river, I think, across the bridge, and some Germans came out that owned a whiskey plant, and they offered us champagne and everything in boxes and crates, and we put it all on the truck, and of course we drank it as we drove along, and you could see some of the GIs alleviating themselves as the trucks went on, as we drove through the place. And of course we did some silly things, call them silly if you will, maybe they're worse than that, but as we'd go through a town sometime, we'd see homes and houses, and there was no compunction to take your gun and shoot a round of bullets at the houses. I don't know if you hit anybody or whatever, but our guys did it, we did it, and it was not as sweetie pie as you think it was.
How did you, when you would make the journey, what were your accommodations for staying? Did you put up tents or?
Well, mostly the accommodations were the ground.
Okay.
We'd find buildings. For example, in Nancy, we found a furniture factory, and we just put our stuff on the ground and slept that way, and lived that way, and cooked that way, and so forth. But it wasn't easy. But we were young, thank goodness, and we could take a lot of it, and we went right along with it because we were on a victory ride. So we felt a lot better than. We even played softball. We had teams against the officers and the enlisted men, and we played volleyball, and we went into towns and mixed with the natives and so forth, things we were not supposed to do, but we did it, and they all did it. And
how were you received?
Okay, yeah, nobody. There was no shooting, no yelling. They received us well because we had things that they wanted. whether it be chocolate or nylon or whatever. And we had food and we had other things, and so they accepted that. Cigarettes, you know, we were big cigarettes at the time, and we shared, you know, tit for tat, so to speak, and it worked out okay for us.
How about your communicating back with the States, with people?
The only thing about V-mail, the old V-mail was the best way. A sad story that I have is that I had saved, I was just newly married, and I wrote to my bride every single day, and I'd saved all the V letters she had, and I put them together and had them in a box down in the basement of our first house. And when we moved, she threw them out. Not that I know about it. That was the story of my life in the war, practically every day. But you know, she didn't realize the value of it and so forth. But I've still got some good memories that I'm writing about in my book, which I've titled "Famous People Who Knew Me." It'll be a memoir. First part will be the war. Second part, my civilian life, and the third part, bon voyage, as we say.
Did you have any time off, any leave that you took?
Oh yeah, yeah. When we were in the right locations, we could go to Paris or Stuttgart. In fact, we were stationed outside of Stuttgart, and we could down in Munich. We could go down there and so forth. And in fact, we'd go to Switzerland. We'd sneak across the border and go over to Switzerland or something like that. But when there was no danger, we went out. In fact, we were kind of silly, as I remember, that we'd go out anyway. We couldn't care less if there were snipers out there or not. We didn't even think about it. But it was by that time the German army was completely whipped and exhausted and glad to get it over with. Anyway, so it was not that dangerous. No, we lost no personnel that way at all. The only thing we lost was people being sent home or sent to another regiment or an Air Force unit.
Were you involved in any combat at all?
Our unit got 2 what they call little bronze stars to put on our medals for being and occupying and being in war zones. In other words, we were considered a war zone, even though we were not in any fighting or battle. We never saw any of that really, but we were in a zone, so we were entitled or to identify. We got these little bronze stars to put on our medals or our bars or uniform and so forth.
Tell me about your training before you went over. What did you think about that?
Well, when I went into the Flying Cadets, it was just like going to West Point or any other major unit. We had underclassmen. We were underclassmen. We had classmen that were second-year men who did everything to us to make us break down and so forth. And then training was very stringent.
What would a typical day have been like in training?
Well, if it's interesting, I was the unit bugler, so I got to get up early in the morning and then go back to bed. But we'd get up at about 6 o'clock, 6:30, have chow, and then go to class to learn ground stuff. And then when we were ready, we got to take our solos. We went with our instructors a couple of times, and when they felt we were ready to solo, we would go to solo. Well, I soloed, and I did fine. I soloed once and I soloed twice. The second time I soloed, I wanted to practice what they call wheel landings. That's bounce the wheels first and then land it. Well, I did that, and I got a little nervous, and that's one of the reasons I washed out. Instead of leveling my stick out to level the wings off, I pulled back, so the nose of the plane went up and went out of control and dove into the ground about, I don't know, maybe 100 feet or so before it stopped, and I jumped out of the plane. I then jumped back in again to turn the engine off. We had learned that. And in the meantime, one of the officers on a little go-kart came out to see if I was all right, which I was. But the only thing that happened to me is that the bridge of my nose got a little bumped up. But otherwise, I walked away from it, and I was immediately put on suspension to go take what they called a test flight with the CEO rather, to see if I, could manage to get back. But by that time, I was distraught, never having been in an airplane anyway before those times. But I did manage to solo, and so that they washed us out, as I said earlier, and never made it in the pilot's training, because by that time everybody was all set and we had enough of everything. But that was very exciting. And then after the solos, we'd have classes. And on the weekends, we were allowed to go into Oklahoma City. I have dates. In fact, each class was only, I think, 13-week classes. It really went fast. We had a big party dance, and we had dates, and we went to the dance, and it was great. Our station, we knew where we were because we were in Oklahoma City, between El Reno and Yukon. Those are two towns, El Reno, Yukon, in Oklahoma. And that was where we were to fly. That's where we took our training. And so if we went out of that area, we were in trouble. But we managed all to say we could see bases of train tracks on one side and a lake and a river on the other side. So that kept us pretty good. But it was, and in fact, I remember vividly getting up there to my first supervised solo and getting up in the air all by myself in this airplane. I was so excited, I screamed, I yelled, I said, I'm flying, look at me. I remember that, I was there all by myself. And I found out later a lot of the other guys had that same experience. That it's so exciting to be able to, they're flying. It was a wonderful experience, one of the greatest experiences in my life, flying a plane alone.
Had you been interested in aviation before that?
Not really. The reason I picked out the Air Force is because I didn't want to go into I knew I'd be drafted. So, but I wanted to get in before because I wanted to pick my branch of service. And if I picked the infantry, that's dirty work. But Air Force, at least if you get killed quicker, you may do, but at least you have a nice place to live and you got decent food. So that's why I picked the Air Force. And unfortunately, or as I say, fortunately didn't make it. So it was a wild experience for a 21-year-old kid.
I also thought it was interesting what you were saying about the Canadians being there. Was that kind of normal that they would try and...
Yeah, they figured that that the men that were accepted for the Air Force in the United States were perfect, physical perfect. They had to be. In fact, of the matter is, I never forget standing next to some football players, great-looking hulks of men, and I was 145 or 146 pounds. And I passed, and these big guys, they were flunked out. High blood pressure, whatever. But I was perfect, just a skinny kid. But, so first of all, I got some people with good health, and you had to have a minimum of 2 years of college to get into the Air Force, this group. So we all had at least 2 years of college, which meant that we were not stupid particularly. And they knew how strict the American was for the pilots, because it was very tricky, and I say we were right in being that, because I saw good guys at the field in my training field spin in, testing out the spin and then never pull out and go into the ground. I remember 2 guys that way, and they were perfectly nice guys, all from the Northeast, but it happened. So I figured that they'd make good pilots if given a little bit more of a chance and opportunity. So they waited for us, and there was nobody prohibiting them from signing us up. So we didn't really sign up. We just said we'd go at the time, and we would go. But as I say, December 7th came before December 10th. I said November before. I think December 7th came before December 10th, so that all those things were canceled, and I had to start all over again, which was okay too, part of an experience. But most of the time, with my background in journalism, I ended up editing the base newspapers and getting special privileges like more rations of gas and so forth, and get around. And I've got most every one of the papers that I wrote, and both in the Army and up until the time we got out. In fact, coming back on the boat on the SS Lejeune, a group of us edited a newspaper on board the ship, and they were ex-newspapermen, journalists, who later on turned out to be, one was the editor, the sports editor of the New York Times, another was a feature columnist for the New York Times, third guy, what does he do? He was a columnist for the Daily Mirror, but they were all guys that went into the service, like what's his name, the guy on 60 Minutes, who I knew very well. What's his name? the guy, Andy Rooney. Andy and I corresponded a couple of times, but they were guys that were professionals, and they all went. And I went back and got a job that I had for a couple of weeks with the New York Daily News, because they had to take us all back after we got out of the service. They had to take a job, but it was only paying $25 a week, and somebody offered me a job at WOR in New York for $40 a week, and with a wife and maybe an expectant child, that $40 looked fairly good, which I took, and that's how it started. And I got involved in radio and television and broadcasting.
What else, specifically, what did you do for the rest of your career?
Yeah, you're talking about after the service? I was just going to say that we had fun in the service. We'd have, I'll tell you one thing.
Okay.
We had a friend who owned one of those fairs, and he lent us a wheel, and we'd take the wheel out, and we'd spin the wheel and have the guys put money down to bet on it. And what my buddy and I, Kenny Snowden, God bless him, he was very good. What we did is, when the money came in so fast, it was 1 franc for me, 1 franc for because when it all finished, whatever the overload was, we'd give it to the winner. But we kept pocketing 1 for us, 1 for them, 1 for us, 1 for. So then we'd go to Belfast, which was where we were stationed nearby, and have a great old night, thanks to our buddies. But anyway, after I got out of the Army, I still wanted to get into journalism and broadcasting, and it was very difficult because they'd say to you, well, what did you do? I tell them what I did in the Army. He says, yeah, but what did you do? You know, it's a difficult. Your experience in the Army as a young person is nothing. That didn't mean anything. You had to have experience. So finally, you take a job as a clerk here, and an assistant here, and each year you get another deal, and your resume gets a little better and a little better. And finally, I ended up doing public relations for CBS, where I was director of press information for the CBS television network for 7 years. And I also was a director of public relations for a major advertising agency called Benton and Bowles, and then little by little got involved with Hollywood and press agent for stars of the stage screeners, you know, like Elizabeth Taylor, Ed Sullivan, what's his name? There's so many of them.
Did you mention Bob Hope?
Oh, well, I got a picture of Bob Hope. He was one of the USO guys. I didn't know Bob Hope. He was one of the few I didn't know. But Arthur Godfrey, I've worked for Arthur for several years. The young people won't remember him, but us older folk remember Arthur Godfrey, and they always say to me, oh yeah, my mother loved Arthur Godfrey. So, well, okay, they loved him, but I worked for him and I had a great time. And I was mostly in the public relations, publicity business for stars and stuff, and later got into the business of publicizing products and so forth. So I had a fairly well-rounded. And when I came down to Atlanta, with my background in broadcasting, I got a job at Channel 2 here, and from there I got a job at WXIA TV, and I spent my time there and created a show called the 11 Alive Community Affairs Awards, which is my baby, and it's still going on 27 years later. And they invite me every year to the show, and sometimes introduce me, which I love, you know, after all.
Did you see any USO shows during the
Oh,
service?
so a lot of them. In fact, I used to
Tell
work
me
on
about them.
Well, Hal Leroy was one. I don't know the name that people won't know. He was a tap dancer. I think he played Harold Teen in the movies years ago. And Bob Hope and this gal, I think her name was Robin something. Anyway, I've got a picture of her again. And I've got a picture of me with a whole group of the guys around a star that she was in the show Glockamora, whatever the name of that thing was. Name slips. But she was there, and she was very big in those days. And then there were some other stars that come out that we would see from a distance, of course. But they did their bit.
How many servicemen would they perform in front of?
Oh, I've seen them perform in front of thousands. Yeah. They do from a little 200 to 1,000. Depends on what their schedule was, and I guess the USO entertainment group set that up, knowing where different people were, and be careful that they weren't in danger and so forth. But they did their job. The big deal was the Red Cross, the Aero Club nurses, not nurses, from the Red Cross. They were always there with there was always that story about they sold the donuts for 5 cents a piece. I don't remember them doing that. But the only thing I had objected to that was that the Red Cross gals always hung out with the officers, not the enlisted men. And it was very simple. Why not? The officers had the officers' club. We didn't. We had the sergeants' club. So they had a better deal than we did. But bitter as we were, we got over it, of course. But I'll never forget it. Always the Red Cross and the GIs who got shafted in favor of officers. So that's what I can say about that.
When it was time for you to come back home, did you have much warning about that? Or
Well, as the war progressed, we were on a point system. You had to have so many points to get home regardless. And every battle star was a 5 point, 10 points, whatever. And so you hope to get the different battle stars, different medals to give you credit. And of course, time overseas, it was something good. So we had a feeling about when it was coming. The thing is, we wanted to be careful that we didn't, when we won in Germany, that we weren't going to be sent to the east. As most of our guys were, when they got out they packed them up and sent them over to fight the Japs and so forth. And but we watched it clearly. It didn't come as a shock that when we were sent home. We did it gradually. So it was just having to have patience, and that was all. The war was over, and unless you were going to be assigned to a German town to be run a town or something like that with your unit, you were sent home.
So you really didn't go home as units, you went home kind of individually?
Yeah, well, not quite individually.
Or just a few?
Yeah, we came together, but we were transferred into different groups because not everybody in one unit was ready to go. But because of the numbers game and because of having the assignments to still worry about what's going on over there. But most of us went together from our units. We got off in Fort Dix is where we got off, and it's a shame we were so anxious to get home we forgot to get the names and the numbers and all the stuff of the people, so we were just glad to get home. 2.5 years is a long time. That's what I tease about the current soldiers. They're over 6 months. They're nervous already. 6 months. Any month is a tough time. But we were there 2.5 years and not knowing when we would have an opportunity to get home because of the war. But so I can understand their unhappiness. But 2.5 years is a long time.
Did many people that you knew over there decide to be career military?
No, everybody. The only one that decided to be, quote, career military were officers. The enlisted personnel, I'm out of here. I don't want no part of you. We just dumped it and let it go, and just as well.
Did you stay connected with any of the veterans groups, organizations?
Well, I joined a thing called, I first joined the Foreign Legion. Yeah, sure.
VFW?
No, well, I joined the VFW. I joined the American Legion, but they had nothing for me. I was too busy trying to make a career for myself, and I wasn't worrying about the past. AVC was a group I belonged to, American Veterans Committee. That was, our theme was citizens first, veterans second, and we believed in that. We didn't think we deserved it because we were veterans. We believed we were citizens first, veterans second. It lasted for a long time, but as you can understand from what I've just said, that nobody's really interested in it. Everybody has a meism in them. It's me, and that is not me. So we finally, after, I don't know, 40 years, 30 years, I don't even know what's happened to it.
Yeah, was that mainly in the New York area, or were they also here
Well,
in
it was
Georgia?
mainly in the New York area.
Okay.
Yeah, the pseudo-intellectuals.
Let me see. Can you think of anything else that you wanted to talk about as far as your experiences over there?
Actually, I consider the fact that I returned alive without any injuries and so forth a very fine experience. I know a lot of the men didn't come back that way, but I was fortunate. I didn't place myself. I didn't have a father who was president or a secretary of state or anything like that to put me places. So it was all by chance that I got here and got there, and I got to the different spots on my own, and I worked for it, and I was just the same as anybody else.
Had you finished college before you went?
No, I had 2 years. I finished 2 years of college. I got a certificate in business management, and I have some points for after the second year, third. But after that, when I knew I was going to go in the service, I didn't care about what points I got. I failed courses and so forth. But strangely enough, now, since I've been working for Kennesaw State University and for Betty Siegel, the president, I want to get a degree from them. And I've asked them if I could get a degree with my 2 years and the 2 years that I need some for business, what they call professional. So I forget what it's exactly. But they said they're going to look into it and see if I can earn it. And if they are, they're going to graduate me on my 85th birthday.
Would you qualify for a GI Bill?
Not anymore.
Not,
no.
I just wondered if there were a time limit on it.
I think there was, yeah.
I think that's marvelous.
No,
Go
but
ahead.
after 62 in Georgia.
Oh, that's
it
right.
doesn't
You don't
cost
have to pay.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. One of the questions we have here, do you think that your military experience influenced your thinking about war or about the military in general?
Oh yeah, I'm sure that it had a lot to do with my feeling of the matter. I am certainly against war of any kind, and I think I have the feeling that the war that we went to in World War II was a right war for us to go to. We had a situation there that was anti-American and anti-everything, and I'm convinced that we did the right thing. The other wars, I'm not too sure whether they were right or wrong, but if called upon, I think that I would serve and do my duty as an American citizen. But I think war is a waste, and I don't understand why we have to get involved in that. It's just it's a losing game. Nobody wins.
Is there anything, we've got a few more minutes, is there anything that you'd like to tell your wife, your children, just about yourself in general, since this is being created for posterity?
Well, no, not really, because they know me pretty well. And I've got a lot of this kind of material that I'm one of those brackets that like to show my pictures and my stuff that I collected and talk about. In fact, as I said, I'm trying to finish this book before I leave this earth, and a lot of it will be in there. As far as the first part will be part of my experiences in the war, and the second part will be my experiences as a civilian. And I think it should be fun to have, and I have a printer or a publisher who is interested in doing it, and he will do it if I'll only get it done. That's the answer, getting it done.
If you were going to tell me one thing about yourself that you would describe yourself, how would you describe yourself to me?
Naive. No. How would I describe myself? Outgoing, fun-loving, not overly bright, but a decent sort of guy.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all of this with us. It'll be wonderful to get it down and get you a copy of it.
Yeah, I'd like to see it. Yeah, that'd be great.
Thanks. Mr. Lowenstein has thought of one more thing he'd like to talk about.
I think that if you find that I have a sense of humor and a good feeling about people, it's strangely enough, it's because of my father, or the lack of having a father. Because not having a male to guide me, I had to look to others, and I had to look to others to get along with people. And to get along with people, you can't be a bad guy. You have to be pleasant and nice and everything else. So I think that my attitude has come across the fact that I was brought up fatherless.
Did your father die?
Yeah, my father died at 38.
Oh, and how old were you?
I was about 11, 10 or 11.
Okay.
So, you know, I had no really guide. The Boy Scouts were my leaders. I loved the Boy Scouts, and I loved all of that stuff.
Did you have any brothers and sisters?
I have a little sister. She's 3 years younger than I am.
Okay.
Yeah, but
Did your mother have to work after your
No,
father?
fortunately, my father was successful in business
Okay.
and left us to a point where we did not have to work, neither my sister, myself, or my mother. In fact, all the money he left is gone. We spent it to the fifth.
Wow.
There's no, that goes your inheritance.
Mhm.
So, and the kids approve it because they're fairly successful themselves.
Okay. And how old did your mother live to be?
87.
Okay.
Yeah, of course she was not in position up until about 85, but she lived to be 87. And I hope to make 85
Mhm.
in November. So we'll see what happens.
And your sister's 3 years younger?
Yeah, she's 80.
Where does she live?
She lives in Long Island,
Okay.
Great Neck, Long Island.
And what's her name?
Lorraine.
Okay. And her last name?
Well, she's been married twice. Bruxmeyer is her last name, yeah.
Okay.
She lost her first husband in an accident. The roof fell on him. And it was very unpleasant.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, but she's a good. We finally gotten back together. We came apart, and over the years we've grown to appreciate each other,
Well, that's
and
great.
it's nice to have that.
It's wonderful.
Thank you again.
Thanks for adding that.
Thank you.